Welcome to the We Are Change talk show. Thank you for joining me. We have another enlightening episode for you today. Important news updates and information that will be of immense value, certainly not to be missed. Joining us to discuss the current situation we are in is Dale H., who has been actively exposing corruption at some of the highest levels. The tyranny is being rolled out widespread. So let's cross over to that interview now to discuss this further. Thanks very much for appearing on the show, Dale. You have been researching and covering many subjects and providing critical analysis on important events. What brought you into this space?
It's a bit of a yeah. I can give you the short answer. I guess just always never really bought the official version of anything as a kid, and slowly as the years go by, you strip away the layers. And it was like when YouTube sort of came out. When was that? I started watching that about 2005, and the glory days of YouTube, where you would click on just interesting subjects and you'd get all the feeds on the side, which you don't get anymore. But yeah, and I just engrossed myself in just anything occultic, really. And then obviously, yeah, went and saw David Icke in 2010, I think it might have been. I don't know if you've seen him in Melbourne, but that was just that was amazing. I went there with my old man, and that really just, he's woken a lot of people up, hasn't he, Icke? So after seeing him, and then he just puts so many, he puts everything, he calls himself the dot connector, doesn't he? So, and then once you get into his stuff, there's so much other references for his material, and it just ventures off into everywhere. So yeah, look, just been researching in my own time, and yeah, so it's just a slow process, isn't it? You're seeing people this year wake up in exponential sort of rate, and you're seeing the process of like people like what you and me have probably been looking at for a long time happen in a very short period of time. And yeah, but for me, it was a slow process over many years, and the more you know, there is, the less there is, So, what's a Socrates quote?
And full credit to putting the time and effort into educating yourself. A lot of people don't apply themselves like they should, and then they're left in a state of uncertainty without that crucial knowledge, which is very important in these current times. Now, they have eased restrictions slightly, though oppression still remains. What's your outlook on the current situation? How are you managing there?
I'm in country Victoria. We've obviously, we've been watching from afar. I've been down to Melbourne a few times, into the bloody Ring of Steel. And look, I've actually, I think it's a lot. If you put that intent out there, that you're not fearful of these sort of characters, it just sort of dissipates, because I've come back in and they checkpoint you on the way back. And I even had a cop last week. I went down and he said, "What were you doing in Melbourne?" I said, "I can't be bothered lying." I just said, just down seeing a mate. And he goes, "You can't go down there. It's beyond your 25 kilometres. And I said, "Oh, I don't care, mate. What are you going to do about it?" And he's like, it was quite good. He pulled me over, gave me a drug test, and then he pulled his mask down, and we started talking on a personal level. We're talking about, he was an English guy. We started talking about football and stuff. And he basically told me that he agreed that it was bullshit. They didn't want to be doing it. And he goes, "Look, I'll give you a warning, mate." But I've had that happen a few times. So I know a lot of the police don't want to be doing this sort of shit either. And that's what's been great, where we've seen this, was that sergeant in Grafton or something, was it in New South Wales, that's got this petition. So it's a nice little step forward. But look, where I am, we're still in mask mandate area. I haven't worn one once. I don't own one. I won't wear one. And look, there's a few places that'll kick you out and that, but it's just a little thing that people can do. It's like, no, I don't have to wear one. I'm not going to. So
yes, and that's good.
But yeah, you're right. It's starting to ease a bit now, which is sort of good and it's sort of not good. You froze. And the way that I mean it's not good is because there was really a build-up of momentum that was starting to happen in Melbourne with one of the rallies where there was great numbers, and then just as that was happening, they eased off the restrictions, and everyone thinks that it's all good now. And I saw a lot of people saying, why are they still protesting? And like, you just don't get, if everything went back to complete normal, we need to continue protests, because we're not protesting against the lockdown. It's this entire system and their agenda, you know?
Absolutely. We are far from out of the danger zone. People become complacent. They think they're out of the trouble, but no, there's still many agendas being implemented. We are still under the threat of multiple attacks, the New World Order, and everything that encompasses. But during your encounter, it was good that they actually dropped their guard and they revealed some information and brought some truth to light, because sadly, that is still a rarity at this point. Many people are still being abused for not wearing face coverings, travelling outside of their designated area, and not social distancing. So, yeah, many people are experiencing forms of harassment and abuse.
What we did on the weekend, so I played cricket, right? So we're playing cricket, and I just don't take any notice of these rules. And then so I said, who's providing afternoon tea? And you're not allowed to. You've got to bring your own lunch now. And then so we were 10 overs into the game, so we're just allowed to start playing cricket now because it's only a small number in a team sport. And after 10 overs, the batsman takes his glove off and everyone starts walking off the field. I'm going, what is going on? And they go, you need, every 10 overs we have to come off and sanitise our hands. And I said, I turned around to my teammates and I said, you're not engaging in this bullshit, are you? Like, and everyone knows it's bullshit, but this is the top-down control to even where local sporting bodies are having to follow these directives all the way down. And I just said, I'm not going to wash. I haven't washed my hands once.
It really is absurd, and it's not logical. A lot of these measures that are being put in place, as you said, sporting bodies, they're in fear of fines or people from the council overlooking the activity and any repercussions that can come from it. It feels like, people are walking on eggshells. They don't want to be attacked from either side, whether they are for the restrictions or against. It's very troubling, and we see a lot of business owners, they're trying to play by the book, and then the tyranny in turn gets pushed onto the consumers. We see customers being turned away during their meal because of time restrictions, all these limits being put on people. It really is outrageous. People are trying to contain themselves, and it's very frustrating trying to not lose your temper in these times. It really is trying, isn't it?
So look, I had some lady the other day, I went into the BP just to get some fuel, and she turns around and she goes, we don't have to wear masks now, do we? I said, no, didn't you know COVID, it's finished, it's over. And she was fuming. But I even had a guy threaten to take me to the parking lot. He just started abusing me in the store. And look, for the most part, it's been pretty good, but I don't watch the mainstream news at all, but I can almost tell when there's been a story of something, because everything seems to be right. And then the next day I'll go out and I'm getting attacked.
Yep.
And it's like, there must have been a story on the news last night. But now you can see that, it's a lot of the other states in Australia have sort of not worried too much because, it's all happening in Victoria. They didn't know how to handle it. And I don't know what you think about this hotel quarantine thing. It's an absolute charade. There was no outbreak in the hotel. It's just another bloody bullshit narrative, but I think it can be one to also bring them down. But now you're seeing these states that have, they've been doing nothing. And then look, it's kicking off in South Australia now too.
Yep, that's exactly right. And these hotel quarantine scandals, yeah, a lot of it is a distraction scenario. They want to get people's attention and take it away from the area that we really should be analysing. So that's very important. And yes, you're right. South Australia are receiving similar treatment to what we experienced here, with restrictions being enforced. The tyranny is being rolled out right across the board. And when people want to go back to some form of normality, yeah, you're right, we see people at the pubs, they're drinking schooners, taking their mask off in between sips. They're willing to, jump through these hoops, no matter how ridiculous they look. It's just to get back to this sort of some form of lifestyle that they're used to. But yes, it seems like nobody can escape this torture and what's being rolled out. They're the next victims, and with the dodgy test kits, we're bound to see the numbers rise over there.
And look, they're kicking it off now in the UK too. What are they doing? 45 cycles within the PCR, and that's how it goes up and it goes down. And I found out last week through a friend here that, you know, their kid had the sniffles or whatever, had the COVID symptoms. They rang the doctor. The doctors don't see you, so they rang the COVID hotline. The COVID hotline said, don't get a test. Now, we're seeing in Victoria now, the agenda is to bring the numbers down. So we haven't had a case for 2 weeks or more, right? And I think this is how they're manipulating it now too. They're telling people not to get these tests. You're hearing Andrew say get the test, but then the COVID hotline saying not get the test, right? So if you're doing a certain number of tests, or, you know, they could change the cycles within the PCR of the amplification, and you just bring the test numbers down. But they're doing them in Victoria to say, look at Melbourne, this is the example for the world, this is how you do it. They did the same thing in New Zealand to go over here, and now they're going to kick it off in the... But look, as far as the COVID scam's it's completely debunked. It's got to the point, it's absolute absurdity now too, where they're saying Victorians, they're going to open up the state border next week, but if you leave the state, we're going to enforce the same sort of rules. It's like they're just poking the bear, and how stupid are the people? How much are they going to take? And I'm shocked that we've got to this point. It's quite sad actually in Australia, and particularly in Melbourne, of how little resistance we've shown. Like, even, look what's happened in Europe. Like, I lived in Eastern Europe, and they just don't tolerate that sort of shit over there. There was one in Belgrade, they tried to do a second lockdown. They're like, we're not going to put up with this shit. They were getting bombed 20 years ago. They know what tyranny is.
Exactly.
We don't know it here. We've had this subtle mind control for such a long period of time. But then if you look at the Strong Cities network that they've set up, and shows the plan for this for such a long time. There was a minister called Tim Holding. I don't know if you remember him. It was around the early 2000s, right? And he was the police minister, and then also the emergency service minister. And he was setting up a lot of this apparatus, and also going to meet over in Israel and the US State Department, where they connected all these other strong city networks, where you're seeing all the rioting happening. And just look at the strong cities, and it's just a list of the agenda that they've chosen for these targets. And then, I'm looking at the CCP connection as well.
Yes.
So, and look, I'm quite confident a lot of this is coming out, because you look at the CCP connection with Trudeau, and now Trudeau in Canada is openly talking about Agenda 21, which, this was a conspiracy theory years ago. If you were bloody Pauline Hanson's talking about it, the Green New Deal, the Great Reset, they're just talking about this shit openly. But I'm seeing this Chinese connection too, especially now with the Hunter laptop that's come out.
Yes. And
they're showing now that Joe Biden, when he first came in the 70s as a senator, that he was getting funded by, I think it's called the BCI International Bank, right? This is this is the banking of all the intelligence services, including, what's the Chinese one called? The Ministry of whatever. It's the Chinese CIA, right, too, but also the KGB. Now, why are they funding Joe Biden, right? They're funding Pakistani intelligence too, and this BCI that was funding Biden, this showing connections in with the intelligence, and then Hunter Biden was working on the boards with some of these intelligence operatives. So it looks like Hunter was being used as an agent for multiple intelligence agencies. When you get to the core, the intelligence agency, they're all one.
Yes.
So I'm seeing people going, oh, it's China, it's China. It's not China. It is a global intelligence network. But it's quite encouraging now, seeing we'll have to see what happens with this laptop. And then, they're also showing that now with what's happening with Dominion, right? Dominion Software, this clearly rigged election. And then what are the other two elections we've just had recently? We've had the New Zealand election, and we've had the Queensland state election, both using Dominion. So if they can prove that this Dominion has been flipping the votes, which if you listen to Sydney Powell, she's extremely confident. They obviously know we're going to have another state. If they're going to have to run another US election, we're going to have another one in Queensland. They're going to have another one in New Zealand. So look, I'm quietly confident about some of this stuff coming out, you know, and then also the CCP connection with Kevin Rudd.
Yes.
It's shown. And then the Paul Keating connection with Catherine Keating coming out of Epstein. Why did they film Catherine Keating? That guy was under surveillance for a long time, but they chose to show that picture of Catherine Keating come out. And then we had the Victorian Parliament talk about the suppression order, which I was so happy to see that. I never thought I'd see that day.
So much information you've brought forward there. No, that is a wealth of information brought forward. They're all definitely linked in. We see corruption with the election. It's obviously rigged. The World Bank, World Health Organization, they're all linked in with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it's all tied in with Agenda 21. They're trying to reduce the Earth's population. All important information that people should be researching, and they say never let a good crisis go to waste. They use the lockdown to ship in the facial recognition systems, technology and all its components. So yeah, all linked in.
I could touch on with a bit of a personal one to me that people probably wouldn't know about as far as Agenda 21. Now, Agenda 21 is it's run through a centralised control system, right, through the UN, and then the subsidiaries that go down, but it's implemented through local council, right? So it's very easy for people to actually spot Agenda 21, and you can see them in your local council documents. So I've been reading over, I'm in Bendigo, and Agenda 21's been in play here for a long time. So I've worked in education, right? So we had a thing called, I didn't know this at the time, I knew there was something dodgy about it, because what they were doing didn't make sense. They called it the Bendigo Education Plan 2005, right? But it was being planned before that. And what they did, this was under the Labor government, I don't know if you remember, they put billions of dollars into new school development, right, at the time. And so all the schools here were ripped down over a period of about 3 or 4 years, and they built entire new schools, the whole city over, all the state secondary schools and some of the primaries as well. And they call these open learning centres, right? Smart buildings. And what they did, so when you and I went to school, you're probably about my age, yeah? 35?
31.
31, oh, sorry. Yeah, but we used to have the standard, these buildings were built, a lot of the old schools were built in the 50s and 60s, and they just had the corridors.
Yep.
And just rooms, right?
And they brought in
now they got these huge open learning centres where you'll have 5 or 6 classes going on at once. And I was looking, I'm going, why do they do this? Because it doesn't increase the education standards. They have their bullshit reasons for doing it. But then what I noticed was I read through some of the documents, and there was some people that weren't for what was happening, and they said security was one of the reasons, right? And I'm like, why are they talking security? But the reason they redesign these buildings is the interconnectivity of devices and the new smart setup. And in my town, this was the first to implement this school system, and also the first in the world to roll out mandatory smart meters, right, in my town. So we were used as a bit of a guinea pig for this whole thing. And then they rebuilt a whole new bank building here, Bendigo Bank, same thing. They call it the Smart Open. And now we're seeing these buildings are popping up everywhere. And if you even look now, like a lot of the homes in these new estates, remember the old houses used to have a little kitchen, was your own room, all small rooms and corridors. Now everything's open living.
Yep.
And they've done this with these television shows where they show these new house designs. It's all open, and this is for the interconnectivity of these devices. It just shows you how long the planning's been.
Open planned living spaces and how that's all designed.
It's called open learning. You'll see this a lot around the world now, and they promote this open learning.
And we see a lot of the Newspeak language. It's all very Orwellian, New Start and smart grid, smart cities, and people under the illusion that it is smart, advanced, and it's exactly what we need. They don't see the threat behind it. So that's very important, and how it's all linked in, and that will be applied with the social crediting score. People will be locked out and they won't have the opportunity to take public transport, anything like that, when they're docked on points, and they stray away from the guidelines implemented.
With these apps too that they've done, like Uber, Airbnb, a lot of these apps where there's no cash being taken going from side to side. But what do you do with Airbnb? You have a stay, you do a rating, right? This is prepping for the social crediting. Same as Uber, you get a ride, you rate it. There's no cash. Yeah, these were the early ones that have done these little Silicon Valley, freaking organizations that were, they're seed funded by CIA as well. They're not little startups that have these brilliant ideas.
And some of the reasons that people can be docked for points, it can be as simple as not social distancing, raising your voice in a public area. It can be cutting in line even, it's swearing in a public place, jaywalking, all these, it all adds up, and people score, it gets deducted from these points. And then when they're left,
I'm screwed, mate.
Yeah. And then they won't be able to log on to Facebook, use their internet. All these privileges will be denied. And then, then we'll see the flow-on effect. It's going to be disastrous.
But the thing though, Jeff, is because we can put an end to this shit, because if enough people don't put up with it, it can't happen. But the thing is, the infrastructure's been set up now. So what are we going to do? Because the infrastructure's on board, but exactly. We don't have to go along with it. But that's the technocracy they want. And there's been this thing over a period of years too, where the governments are corrupt, but they're showing you they're corrupt too, and they also want you to see that the government's bad. We need a technocracy. We need a world run by scientists and experts and computer models. But look at these computer models. What have they done? Like David Icke calls it bullshit in, bullshit out. And we're seeing that with Dominion. You put bullshit into the computer, you get bullshit come back out. And I don't want to live in a bloody world run by AI and computers.
That's
for us to merge it. It's not happening. I'll go to jail before that happens.
Copies of the books. So all that remains is digital versions, which they can delete and alter at any given time. So that's the modern age, the digital book burning. It's a bit like the Spanish Inquisition that took part. And as history shows, whatever takes place, the ruler always writes history, his story, many origins of words, so much misconception. It's hard for one to get out of their zone and do research when people are being heavily censored, and the punishment and the tyranny on top. They're even calling for people that refuse vaccinations to be remained in lockdown or even prison time. So you can see that mentality, don't you? Anybody that strays away from society and the tyranny, they get punished. So it's unavoidable.
Have you seen the one with Ticketmaster that come out this week? That if you buy, so Ticketmaster's coming, but it's fantastic. You're just showing that all the where all these people, these organisations are at. That Ticketmaster's going to tell you can't go to an event again. Well, do you know what we do? We don't go to no bloody event. We vote with our money. I'm not going to go to a football game if I have to have a vaccine. I don't need that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, but like you said about history too, like we don't freaking know history either. And they're talking about the Great Reset now, but how many resets have we had? Is this the Great Reset, or how often do we get reset?
And we can never trust any of these trials, tests that are conducted. And even if it was true and correct that 90% safe and effective, that still isn't good enough. So 1 in 10 people are struck down with adverse reactions. That is unsatisfactory and very troubling. We see this new company, Moderna, step into the mix. They're on the 3rd round of vaccine development, and we've seen the first CEO was Fauci, another person that cannot be trusted. They're all linked in, Freemasonry, secret societies, and it is very much a dilemma for some people. Should they go ahead and receive the round of shots, or should they risk to sacrifice everything, their driver's license, employment and freedom?
It's a terrifying thing that what is this vaccine about, really? It's been the whole point of like how far you want to go is this is heading towards transhumanism.
Yes.
And this is what we want. And this AI and artificial force within the whole universe trying to assimilate us with that. Now I don't want to go too far into that, but that's the agenda and that's where it's heading and that's what this force is. But yeah, look, I mean, like, as far like with the vaccine, there's a doctor called Dr. Graham Downing, right? He's got a great interview. He talks about frontal lobe damage, right? So a lot of people don't want to hear. I probably shouldn't say it on here, I might get delayed, but like that disease that vaccines don't cause, right? This is damage to the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe, that's the human side, right? There's empathy, emotion, and so what they've done, what they've also found too, is with people that are in relationships with a psychopath or someone that has had trauma over a period of time, this changes frontal lobe activity, right? And if you think of the psychopath and the victim, this is what we're living through now. We've got a government. It's like the battered wife syndrome, right? We're sitting there, we're just copying more and more and more, but we don't know any other way, so we just keep going back. These are our leaders. This is my husband that's abusing me, but I'll just keep going back. And this causes damage to the frontal lobe. What Graham Downing found too is that there's an AI side to this too, where they're introducing even things like paracetamol that you give to a baby. This causes damage to the frontal lobe as well, right? So what do they tell you when you've got a baby? When it's got a temperature and it's young, give it paracetamol. It's the last thing you want to be doing. And then they introduce these video games. This is where it's getting to the AI, right? And they've shown too, again, from overuse of gaming does damage again to the frontal lobe. So I'm looking at this attack on a certain part of the brain and the part of the brain that makes us human. So
very interesting. That is groundbreaking research.
I'm seeing this oppressor victim mindset, and the only way out of this is we need to drop that. We don't need to be ruled. We're infinite beings. We don't have a ruler. Like who do you bow to? And this Daniel Andrews character, like he's shown that he's an abuser. What are we going to do? Why would anyone listen to what he has to say? Why follow his rules? And then we saw the chief health officer the other day. This photo's circulating around. He's sitting out on the beach without a mask on. Fair enough. You shouldn't be wearing a mask. But they're his directives. Why are we following this?
Exactly right. And very much a concern is the autistic-like characteristics that develop after an injection. We see this come out in a lot of healthy people, and exactly right, rewiring brain chemistry. We see that, and Dan Andrews fits all the traits of a psychopath if you look at that profile. All this is very concerning, and that's right, the frontal lobe, all the feelings, thoughts and reactions. Yes, we see a lot of outlandish behaviour coming from people, the aggression, violent mood swings, and that can all be attributed to adverse reactions from this injection.
100%, and you got to think what are they trying to do with this injection? This is to alter the human as well too. But I think it's like what did Huxley say too about like the pharmaceutical making them happy through pharmaceuticals too, and that who said they can't induce some of this sort of stuff with these RNA vaccines, that you're going to love your servitude.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Brave New World. And that was very prophetic. And that's exactly what's coming into place. We see the Big Brother surveillance systems. We see the dependence on pharmaceuticals. We see the constant propaganda. We see the initiatives that are put in place for people to dob in neighbours and snitch on others. They want children to dob in their parents as well. And there's rewards that are put in place for people that do so. That is a very dishonest system when you have people that are incentivised to dob in and snitch on others. That goes against every trait the Australians have. You know, it goes against our spirit, and all of our complete being. You're supposed to look after one another, not try and look for an opportunity where you can report them to authorities so you can have some sort of cash bonus on top. This is not how we want society to be structured, is it? Somebody is late putting their bins out, or they're not wearing a mask, and then all of a sudden they're being reported. And we've seen them pushing this hotline for people to do so.
It's like I said about the brain before too, because if you're traumatized and you're deactivating the frontal lobe, what are you going into? You're going into the reptilian, the R complex of the brain, which is fear response, which is like this collectively what we're living in now, this entire fear response. And who's going to dob in their neighbour? But this is another thing that they've conditioned us over time too, that in Australia we all live on our quarter-acre blocks and people don't know their neighbours anymore. We don't have this community living. And again, the response to that is this is what we've got to go back to. We need to go back to community living, which there has been a good aspect of that people are probably connecting more with their families and stuff too, but there's this divide now too between those that are sort of on the verge of waking up and those that are just cold dead asleep, and there's no middle ground with these people anymore. And unfortunately, it's sad to say, but they're the ones, they're holding us back, and if the agenda is going to be implemented, it's going to be because of them. But what do we do with that? We have to form with like minds and like groups. But
that's right. And when you see Victorian police bringing shame and dishonour on the entire force, committing such vile acts, it can be completely justified why somebody would want to wear a mask in public or in a vehicle, because they don't want to be dragged along the ground, handcuffed, stomped on. They're afraid of the police brutality. So are they really to be blamed when they see violent, horrific acts being committed by others in the law enforcement branches, and then they're worried that they might receive the same treatment? So it's really hard to.
That's what. Yeah, David Icke always talks about this whole top down of acquiesce, trying to control you, and then acquiescing and control, acquiesce. But then, like Mark Passio talks about that. People say, oh, there's an awakening happening, which I think there is too, but he goes, I'll tell you there's an awakening happening when police and military are quitting in their droves. And is it going to have to get to that point? Because these people, I know the excuse of like, it's just for a paycheck, but I'm sorry, like I couldn't do that for a job. The moment I'm asked to do something like that.
Yep.
What does that mean?
Well, that's right. However, a lot of them are compromised, because you see people from law enforcement and government, they're all linked in with secret societies, Freemasonry, so they're all on the same page. So when they go to their meetings, they say, okay, this is the agenda that's being implemented. They set the policies. They're all given their plan and their mission objectives. So that's how come that they have unity in that regard.
They have unity in their common goal, but how do you vet these sort of people? How do we know who's in the secret societies and who's not? And like, I think as far as like Victoria, as trusting the police, people just need to read Raina Michaelson's testimony and then tell me about like why you would follow the Victorian police. I'm not saying all Victorian police are involved, but there is an element within Victoria Police that is involved in covering up of pedophilia, and they've got key positions in these. So like with Raina Michael, this was going down to the Mornington Peninsula Childcare Centre too, where the children were alleged to be taken into actual police places and being abused by police and being filmed. And this is this wasn't that long ago, and this shit hasn't stopped her. And I saw you did that you did an interview with Lizzie Rose, right?
Just about to mention that. I've got that noted down. I appreciate you airing a portion of my interview with Lizzie. The tunnels are of an immense concern.
One of my clips,
They're using these passageways. Some of the uses include trafficking children, sacrifices, all types of rituals. And it was surprising to see Fiona Patton lift up a trap door and take a photo. And that was all in the same week. So that was very eye-opening.
With that, mate, what do you think? Because Right. So Patton, she signed on the omnibus, didn't she?
Yes, she stabbed everybody in the back.
So, and this is a thing too. So anyone that's got the signatory on that, I'm sorry, but when the guillotine comes, your name's on that and you're done for treason. So
That's
this is
exactly
how
right.
serious it is, because that is a treasonous act. But then she puts up this, for people who haven't seen it was on her Instagram, right? Everyone's doing the round. And she's put up a trapdoor. What did she write? Some weird tunnels in Spring Street or something.
Yes, that's absolutely right, alluding to the fact that there are myths surrounding this, and who knows what's in there. It looks like she will go in on a solo investigation. Very, very scary situation there. And I've interviewed Fiona Patton as well on a different matter, and she seemed nice and trustworthy, like many do, until they're put in a position of power, and then it's a complete betrayal on the people that put them there. So yes,
I don't think that's Patton putting that out.
No.
Someone's told her to put that out, and like, who's she working for, and what's this really about, and is this part of some sort of disclosure, or I don't think that's Patton putting that out.
No.
Someone's told her to put that out, and like, who's she working for, and what's this really about, and is this part of some sort of disclosure, or is it revelation of the method where they sort of have to tell you? But like, it's quite a weird thing to do that. But you look at Melbourne's got an extensive tunnel system from what I've heard, and where I live the same too. But I know like Fiona Barnett talks about it, her experience, and hers seems to be this US sort of controlled CIA international pedophile network, right? Linking in with Australia and ASIO. But I've heard elsewhere too that the links in with Melbourne is more to do with the aristocracy and European sort of pedophile network, right?
Yes.
So this could be, it seems to be an older infrastructure as well. And Sydney and sort of Wollongong seems to be more connected with this sort of CIA run pedophile network. But I know up where I live, we've got massive, so Bendigo's a gold mining town, right? And we've had there's been some crazy shit around here. We've had we had an earthquake in Wedderburn the other day. There's been one in Broadford, which is just near the Puckapunyal military base.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but the tunnel networks here are quite old too. So we used to have an old military barracks in town too, but I've actually had friends that have been in one of the tunnels that connects the old boys' home and girls' home in the town.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
And then Rachel Vaughan has mentioned to me too that they use sort of adjacent markings with some of the streets where they use the word terrace, and these are both on terraces. And I know that one of these links into the cathedral in town, which is a very old cathedral too. So look, these tunnel networks they're vast, right?
Yes, very intricate passageways, and you can see that's very alarming when you see a orphanage or a boys' home, and then there's an offshoot, a trapdoor into a tunnel system, a labyrinth, and it crisscrosses underneath the city. It can go to Freemason lodges, to hospitals, all the way through to courthouses, and then underground dungeons with an altar. And I would imagine there would be, camera systems under there as well. So if anybody penetrates a restricted area, they would be notified of that. I'm sure they would have some sort of system set up around the perimeter. But yes, there's a lot of tunnel goers, a lot of teenagers as well. They like to go underground. They take backpacks and torches, because it makes for interesting viewing sometimes on YouTube. But yes, more exploration is needed, and certain times to be, following this, very important. But yes, it seems common practice under every capital city and other areas as well. It seems like this is protocol for a lot of politicians and dignitaries. It's common practice for them, isn't it? Especially on occult dates and moons as well.
Yeah, we just had like Halloween recently, didn't we? But look, there's obviously an element of it that is well, not necessarily trafficking, yeah, but the abuse as well that happens in these underground networks. But I've been listening to a lot of this guy called Ron Swanson. He talks about the the deep web, right? He researches the deep web and some of these online pedophile networks, and like he talks about the range of different pedophiles. But he was talking about how to traffic drugs and stuff, especially like he was talking about it from Mexico into America, it can be difficult. You got to pay people off. They always have this element of they take into account monetary wise that how much might get busted. But trafficking children, nothing looks any different that you're in a car and you've got 3 kids in the back. They don't get vetted to see are they your kids, why are those kids there? And this is how trafficking is, especially across that sort of border, is crazy. But interestingly, he talks about this online pedophile network syndicate, right? And the operations, a lot of it was being done in Melbourne. And we've seen 2 big busts. There was one on the Central Coast and there was one in Australia-wide, but quite a few in Melbourne that happened a few weeks ago. And they've arrested a lot of these guys connected to this viewing and distribution of online porn, right? And there was a guy in Melbourne called Lux. He was running a deep web website called Hurt to the Core. And this is I won't go into it, but it's the most graphic sort of child abuse you can have. Like we're talking torture, murder, this sort of things. And some people would actually gain access to this website, have to go out and torture or murder a child, send the video in to get access to the thing. But there's hundreds of thousands of people on these subscribed to these websites on the dark web, right? And then a lot of the so he was working as a distributor, and some of them they pay $10,000 to view one video. And this is like, how does the intelligence networks not know about this, right? Because they bust these guys. He was said to be the biggest, one of the worst distributors in the world, but then the investigation stops there. But what happens is this guy was talking about that website just gets shut down. It rebrands on the dark web as something else and it's up and going the next day. So nothing actually happens. But you're telling me the intelligence networks and, the internet was created by DARPA, which is, what do they call it? The technology department of the Pentagon. Yes. They created the internet. What, they don't know how to get onto the deep web, but like some YouTuber, he's able to get onto it? Like, come on.
Exactly. Defence and research projects. But yes, it's very, very unsettling to think what's on that dark web, and people like ourselves and many others, they wouldn't understand the thought process behind somebody logging on and wanting to view such material. It really is shocking. And we see in the Wayfair scandal as well, we see prices for furniture and other items really expensive, and they seem there is an ulterior system that's put in place where it's the sale of children, but it's listed under different items for sale on websites. So they're really trying to really find any loophole they can to traffic and abuse children. They go to enormous lengths to go undetected, don't they?
I looked a bit into the Wayfair scandal, and it's proper sus. Like, it doesn't make much sense at all. But I mean, it does make sense that they would do that. But I don't know about that one. But it could be legit. But this is how they operate too. I know, like Fiona Barnett talked about like P&O Cruises. What was the other one? What's that coffee place? Gloria Jeans and stuff. And they use like. Yeah, I won't go to it. I don't want to.
But yes, I had Fiona Barnett on the show, and revealing information that really incriminates many politicians and people in positions of power. Very unsettling information. And we see the Disney Cruise Line traveling to Little St. James Island, Jeffrey Epstein. You just got to connect the dots, don't you?
That's right. And look what's been implemented now with Epstein too, and now they were talking that Kevin Rudd was on this board with John Kerry, Henry Kissinger, and Ehud Barak, that receiving money off Jeffrey Epstein. So I'm seeing another link in here with Australia too. And then you've obviously heard Fiona's done interviews where they speak about Alexander Downer, right?
Yes.
So Alexander Downer, George Papadopoulos, who's he was the one who was framed for this whole Russia sort of hoax stuff, which is, that I don't know if you've seen the McCabe interview that Ted Cruz did the other day at the hearing. So he was deputy director of the FBI, but he was part of this whole group that tried to frame Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And Ted Cruz is just hammering him in this video. I shared it the other day. It's fantastic. But then what happened yesterday, George Papadopoulos put something on his Twitter, and he said, I think it's about time that they open up the Obamagate, unseal the Obamagate documents. Oh. And again, this is implementing Biden as well, because he's got the fight. He was part of the group that got this FISA warrant. But the point I wanted to get to was Papadopoulos was set up by Alexander Downer, right? Who was working in the UK at the time. And that's what happens with these characters. And once they're out of government, when you're on the secret society network, you're in the cult to the day you die. And he was doing his job. So he was working as a bloody spy. So what Papadopoulos has said, he said, I think it's about time they release the documents, and then people are going to be shocked about Alexander Downer and who this character really is, right?
Yeah, so, many skeletons in a lot of their closets. And
so I think he's shitting his pants down.
Absolutely.
So he should be.
It's all cloak and dagger activity taking place at these lodges, and many missions to compromise people, blackmail, secret videotapes. It covers a long line of methods used to obtain information and use people and get leverage over the top. That's the way it's all been structured. It's always like that. We see it in many of the initiation rituals as well. They've gone to every measure and every level to ensure that their secrets are kept within these lodges as well, and that the agendas are always followed. So nobody can deviate from the plan, because then videotapes will emerge, and you can even see some people that don't follow the orders. Next minute, they'll end up in tabloids, in magazines. They've got many ways and multiple resources at their disposal, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And you look at, like, who's the media been going after the last few years in Australia? It's like Craig McLachlan, right?
Yes.
I always worry about him. I don't know anything, but like, he was on Young Talent Time, wasn't he, Craig McLachlan? He was on Neighbours. I find it interesting that they're sort of been hammering him too. And one of the things that the satanic element like to do is they love to accuse you of what they do, right?
Yes.
So he's been accused of sexual assault. But mate, Australia's it's a filthy place. I think we're going to find an element of how significant Australia is to this global network, especially as far as the human trafficking sort of side of things, and the real power that, you know, sort of lies in the world. I know everyone thinks America's the power because, you know, they're the military element of the power, aren't they?
Very much so.
You know, you got the Trinity, with obviously the, you know, Rome being the spiritual, and then the City of London being the financial. But where does Australia sit in this as well too?
Yes, all good questions that must be raised. And that Craig McLachlan, it is a little bit suspicious when you see him dressed up as a transvestite in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. There are definitely some suspicions there. But it could also definitely be a distraction scenario that we always see, trying to deflect attention. We always see that as well. So, yeah, it definitely raises some concerns.
Yeah, and I don't know if I even should have sort of brought that up. I just sort of felt that it's been interesting that, you know, that they've hammered him too. Look, I tend to think Craig McLachlan's probably not a bad guy, but we do know the other bloody Melbourne media people that have been accused by Fiona and such as well, don't we? And they're still running rampant, and they have worked in the same circles, and in you know, the entertainment field, haven't they, with Craig McLachlan?
Absolutely. And something else that I always find very disturbing is when you look at people like Sir Rolf Harris, Sir Jimmy Savile, and anybody that's been given this knighthood. They're called pedo medals, Fiona Barnett has said before. and anybody that commits these heinous acts on children, they seem to be commended and praised for that. And that always makes me look at other people that have received this knighthood and question them. What sick, depraved acts did they have to commit and vile atrocities to receive such commendations? And when you look at people like Sir David Attenborough, I just don't know anymore when you think about it. You know,
did you see Attenborough? Did you see him? I think it was last year when they did the first ever 5G rollout. There was at Glastonbury or whatever in the UK, and like I just looked at that and so there's our first ever rollout of 5G at this festival, and then what happens? David Attenborough gets on stage to deliver his speech to a bunch of kids that are probably off their head on drugs and stuff like that. And I'm like, there's got to be this element of mind control that's happening here too, especially when you look at what Tavistock and stuff like that did in the 60s, and Laurel Canyon with the CIA, and they started this whole sort of Woodstock sort of movement too. And I'm like, and then you look at, people praise Edinburgh. I know some people that are quite awake to a lot of things, but they love Edinburgh, But you're right.
And any time someone tries to come across really innocent and really sweet, charming, then sometimes that's just a cover as well. Not saying that it is, but there's always a level of doubt when it comes to anybody that's received this knighthood. That is the main underlying fact.
100% right. If you get the knighthood, that's a big red flag. And then, who was the other one, buddy, that was connected in with the Madeleine McCann thing? They're saying like Sir Clement Freud, right? Sigmund Freud's. Exactly. But like in Australia, we've got I always look to people that have knocked back the knighthood, right? So you got like people like David Bowie.
That's interesting.
Did John Lennon knock it back as well? Maybe he did. I'm not sure, but he never got one, right? But then you got in Australia, it's the equivalent is the Order of Australia, right?
Yes,
it's the same thing, isn't it? And you look at some of the people that are on that list as well.
Exactly right, and all linked in with these royal bloodlines. And you even seen Tony Abbott as well handing that Order of Australia out. And
didn't he give it to Prince Philip?
That's exactly right. 100%.
That was the biggest piss take ever, wasn't it? It was
good memory for remembering that. That's absolutely what happens.
And the public didn't like that either. It's like, Prince Philip getting the Order of Australia, like for his services too,
Yes.
And like what a character that guy is too, his relationship with Savile, but he was the nephew of Lord Mountbatten as well, that was connected to Kincora Boys Home. But that's what's happened with the Savile case now too. They had this inquiry for years. Nothing bloody happened. They had to change the person at the head 4 times over because not Margaret Thatcher, who was the previous Prime Minister, Theresa May. People forget this too. She appointed these bloody people that were connected in with the pedophiles that they were supposed to be investigating. And then what happened to Theresa May? She became Prime Minister after it.
Yes, that's exactly right.
It's an absolute shit show. But, what they do with these investigations is they draw them out so bloody long that everyone just forgets. And then they'll write the report. And it's the same thing what's happening with the COVID sort of stuff too, is that, if you had tried to implement this in a few weeks, but like now everyone's so used to this. This is, the new normal.
Absolutely. They've been conditioned and programmed to accept this sort of treatment as normal, to make sure you've got a mask on before you leave your house, to always keep a distance from people. They've been brainwashed, and then it's hard to reverse that. Even if they were to come out and say, no, there's been no cases, everything's back to how it was, you'd still see people wearing masks. That will not change now. And then we see Dan Andrews saying that that'll be a normal part of the culture. And it's so upsetting.
Fauci came out, I think it was yesterday, and said that even now after you get the vaccine, this is the abuser again, people just taking it. Even after the vaccine, I think masks are here to stay. So there's a lot. So we're being told that nothing goes back to normal until we get the vaccine. Now we're getting told you're going to get the vaccine and it's still not going back to normal, which was always the plan anyway. They just shift it, But
Exactly. And
this Fauci guy needs to be in jail.
He certainly does. And I think when he threw that curveball, remember when he threw that baseball at the opener there, I think that was a secret sign, as if to say it was a metaphor. He is throwing a curveball. So, it could have been something more to that. It could have been a coded act. But it's very, very strange. And I and many others have captured some serious situations and accidents that have occurred, people that have been wearing these masks and their face coverings.
Yeah, I saw that one you did in the shopping centre, mate.
Yeah, disturbing incidences that have occurred during this crisis, people collapsing and being rendered unconscious. Yeah, it's very sad. It's all due to the application of these masks. And it's fair to say that this would be occurring in shopping malls right across the country, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, that's right. Like Del Bigtree did, he did a video with his son, healthy young kid, and they put a mask on him and they were just monitoring his oxygen intake or his oxygen levels, and I can't remember the percentage, but it dramatically dropped to the point where they said if he was wearing this for several hours, that would be a serious problem. And this is a young, healthy kid, right? And unfortunately, if you're seeing now that a lot of the most indoctrinated are the elderly, and I think because when you get older, what do? A lot of them just sort of sit around and watch TV all day. So they're just being psychologically abused. And then, I saw like a lady the other day walking with a walking frame down the road and she's got her bloody mask on. I'm like, it's disgusting, but like people need to be held accountable for this. This bloody Brett Sutton, he hasn't got a mask on. Some old lady's walking down the road, struggling to breathe. He needs to go to jail as well too, this Sutton character.
Absolutely.
And look, the ladies love him, he's got a nice smile and that. That's the bloody indoctrination. So does, all these newsreaders, they've got a beautiful hair and a pretty smile. It's not the truth.
It's all and propaganda. That adds to the fact and contributes as to why he would be likable. It's only because people are naive to that fact of the sinister activity taking place behind the scenes, but we see the establishment continues to push their agenda regardless of how many people are victimised. Visitors to retirement villages, in some cases, they're wearing nuclear safety style gloves through a perspex screen when visiting loved ones. And that's if they're fortunate to get in at all. People are being turned away. They feel like breaking their loved ones out of such facilities. It's really heartbreaking what's taking place on the elderly, isn't it?
It's shocking. It's like, look, I've got personal cases close to me. I know people that their grandparents have died and they weren't even allowed to see them. That is pure sick. That is evil, and there's no excuse for that. That's a crime against humanity doing that. And then and like seeing the little kids. But then I've also heard cases I know directly through someone I know as well too, that they did get offered money to put COVID on the death certificate, and luckily they didn't take it. But I mean, look, the scams, it's so exposed. It's like, I don't even really want to talk about it. It's like, how much more you can't show people this anymore if they're not willing to if they're not willing to go out and find the information, or they're not willing to look at it. What are you going to do? We can't worry about those people anymore.
Absolutely. How much information do they need to make an informed decision and realise that this is all a pandemic and it's all staged, a criminal operation that's been orchestrated here? What does it take before people have that awakening? It really makes people ask that question. And how much more injustices can be pushed down. We see people, they're forbidden to worship at their local church. For some people, that's their only social interaction that they afford themselves. I mean, they're trying to break people down spiritually as well, aren't they?
100%. It's all spiritual in the end too. And it's interesting if you look in America as well too, because America is quite a religious nation, right? And I've got friends over there that are sort of pretty strong sort of Christians and stuff too. And with the shutting down by a lot of the governors of these churches and that too, that is their life for a lot of people. And that's why, that Trump's drawn in so much of that, that Christian group and other religious groups too, like a lot of the Jewish Orthodox and stuff too. They're very, very sort of pro-Trump and that as well too. So what are you going to do if supposedly Biden comes in? But, like they're a dangerous, that Christian element in America, because, they say there's like 40, 50, 70 million, like pretty fundamental Christians in America, and they're freaking armed and they know their rights. And we've lost our rights over here. We don't know our rights. We think we've got, tell an Australian to cite any part of the Constitution. They can't do it. Most people don't even know we have a Constitution, But, in America, that is inbred into you too. And the Second Amendment, how strong the First and the Second Amendment go together. And we had it torn away from us in 96 under a false flag. I think, they did it at the same time they did the Dunblane one as well in the UK. But
that's absolutely
you can see the setup of how long it's happened. And people go, oh, I don't need a gun. Or it's not about if you need a gun. It's you have the right to have a gun. If the government has a gun, you can have a gun. And what Americans say too is you have the right to the equal gun that the government has. If the government's got, proper machine guns, you've got a handgun, it's not an even playing field. Absolutely. And if people don't like that, well, the government shouldn't be getting those guns to use on the people either.
Very well said. And it should be nobody's business but your own when it comes to what the person owns, not the neighbour or the person down the street. If they're a law-abiding citizen, that should be their right to bear arms, and it should be promoted, and people should be proud to do that. They shouldn't feel like they are criminals for wanting to protect themselves and their family. And the statistics show areas where there are more firearms, the crime rate is actually a lot lower. So, that's...
Well, look at Chicago's got a total gun ban, and it's out of control.
Absolutely right. And what we have here, we didn't stand much of a chance when they did that gun buyback and the Port Arthur scandal. That's right. We were disarmed, and then that leaves us really defenseless. For times like this, the government would be more reluctant to push through tyranny if they had more people that were proud gun owners.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, people need to go back and look at John Howard too, this character, John Howard. Now, he always, what we just spoke about before with the election fraud, he was always looking like he was going to lose the election every time he was up, remember? And then he'd snatch it at the last minute. But, have you seen the speech where Howard gave, it was the identical speech to, I think it might have been the Canadian Parliament in regards to the weapons of mass destruction thing. He was leading the charge there with Bush and Blair. He needs to be locked up for the rest of his life too.
He certainly does.
I won't go into it too much too, but he oversaw the Bali bombing as well.
I was actually on a plane with John Howard. He was travelling in business class.
Really?
And he was travelling unaccompanied. He had no bodyguards or anything. So it's a wonder that he's brave enough to walk around showing his face after what was committed and introducing the work for the dole scheme, slave labour for Australians. He really pushed us further down into despair, didn't he?
He brought in the GST too, and people voted for that. Remember the old, what was it, I think 96 GST. Unbelievable. But like, I ran into Joe Hockey one day too. Geez, I wanted to say something to him. Yeah. And it was about a week after they just got in, and he had just been over to the Federal Reserve Bank in America. That was his first point, right, as treasurer. So you're elected treasurer of Australia, and then off he goes to get his buddy Marchin, or I don't know if it was Janet Yellen or Bernanke or back then. But, then come straight back here, and they got elected saying that they were going to, bring the budget back into surplus. That was their whole thing. He went straight over there, came back, met with the Reserve Bank of Australia and doubled the debt.
Yeah, exactly. He's a real criminal, that Joe
It
Hockey.
wasn't even spoken about. It didn't even get anything on the news. And I'm like, how has this occurred? But
I think he gloats on the fact of how much crime he commits. We've seen him when he introduced that tobacco tax. Joe Hockey was later on with a big cigar and drinking wine. You know, he just has no care whatsoever when it comes to the Australian public. It's all one big crime syndicate, and he's very much a part of it. They're all linked in. And, you know, we even seen that with the Bill Heffernan. He wanted to release these names and the suppression orders. They're covering for each other. When you can't bring people to accountability that have done atrocious, heinous crimes, they're being looked after, then it doesn't leave us with much hope, does it? We need to reverse these orders. And all these crimes and sinister behaviour from these politicians, they really deserve to have their reputation tarnished. And that's why we have to keep exposing their corruption and wrongdoing with our channels, interviews, and on various platforms. We have to hold them accountable with all of our resources, don't we?
And good on you, brother. Like you've been doing it for quite a while too. So,
Thanks.
you know, like credit to you, man. That's like, but you know, what is it that makes you do that? It's like you have this, you got some sort of sense of injustice, and
yeah, that's
what are you going to do about it? You're not going to, you know, like everyone can do different things, but you've obviously found a way of, you know, that you can make some sort of impact. And if it doesn't work, at least you can go to bed at night and live with yourself and know
well, that's
you've done
exactly
something.
right. And that's very good that you raised that. And what it is as well is it's very frustrating, the whole situation with the tyranny, and it makes I feel sometimes really angry about the whole situation. So to have a platform like this, it's like therapy. I can get on a talk show or make a video and I can vent. I can say, look at these disgusting pedophiles in Parliament. Look what they're pushing through. Look what they've done to the elderly. Look at the checkpoints they got in place, the testing facilities. Look at the dodgy test kits. How dare they treat people like that in lockdown, hand them expired food. This is disgusting. And instead of, you know, getting angry and venting on people around me or somebody down at the supermarket or somebody that cuts me off in traffic or it's anything like that, I can jump on a talk show and vent that way. And that helps me because it saves me from bottling all this up. So, I mean, that's
good. Everyone's got different releases, and that's obviously a healthy thing to do, isn't it? But look, I'm sort of quite calm about things at the moment too, and I do feel this is getting to a head where this is coming out. I can't see any other way than this is coming out now, and I don't think the people are going to put up with it. We haven't seen the resistance we probably wanted to in Victoria, but when it comes down to the crunch, you know, when people have lost everything, they lose it. And I can't see them implementing this system. Humans are meant to be free. What they've tried over, you know, many, you know, thousands of years, different types of control systems, and they always get torn down eventually. Now, what we saw with like the Soviet Union, that was probably one of the best control systems, and for a long period of time, you know, except for like if you go back to ancient Rome and things like that. But you know, they eventually came down, and then, you know, Hitler's fascism came down, Pol Pot, you know, came down. But these are all little pockets. They've trialed different forms of human control over the years, and then obviously the modern day version has been what's been happening in Palestine, and we've all just sat back and freaking watched it happen over there because it's not our problem. But now what's happened, which is kind of good, is they've gone for full worldwide tyranny. They've implementing this, you know, this one world sort of system, Marxist sort of system on a global scale. Yeah. It's never been done before. It's never been done where they've gone for the full scale human control of the whole planet.
They're getting brazen, aren't they? And they've
shown their cards.
Yeah, exactly. And we said this omnibus bill, they're even looking at famous style facilities, a concentration camp where anybody that denies this whole agenda or they deny the COVID situation, they'll be put into a re-education facility with a package that could include torture. I mean, they're really pushing it to as far as they can go when they start trying to roll stuff out like that. We look at that. Are you concerned about a FEMA camp that will be implemented in future? Truth tellers will be confined to this?
Yeah, look, and like Alex Jones was going on about this bloody years ago, wasn't there? Putting FEMA, but like it is part of the bloody plan too. We've seen this in New Zealand, Canada. I know directly that they are doing up facilities in Melbourne. I can't say where, but there's also a massive tender that's just gone out for another prison not far from me, and they're doing upgrades in Barwon as well too. So something's something's happening. Something's happening, right? Who they're going to be for, I don't know. I'd hope to think they're for the politicians eventually. If we can freaking take down this system, that'd be a nice way to twist it on them. But I mean, what do? You can't have fear about these things. The way forward is not to acquiesce.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? At the end of the day, I'm not going to change anything I do. And if I happen to get locked up in a camp for it, then so be it. But if enough people have that courage, then they can't do it. They can't get us all.
That's very brave, and more people need to exhibit that type of courage. The state of emergency is still in place. It's still very unsettling. We are far from out of the troubling times that we're in. Hopefully we don't end up in these facilities. I'll probably
we could be cellmates, Jeff. We'd be cellmates.
Stay vigilant, continue to support each other. Outstanding interview, powerful broadcast. Thanks once again for coming on the show, and all the best for the future.
Thanks, brother.